to cloud. All right, gang. So we're here to engage in this thing that is called Wise Crowds. This give and get help pattern, where one of us will take the opportunity to express some form of question, some form of help request, some form of space that they're not certain of, and would appreciate consultation. And then the rest of us as a group, well, after 2 or 3 minutes of hearing that help request, will respond by asking some additional clarifying questions. Important to note that clarifying questions are different than coaching questions, but they're tend to be more factual based, so that we can get some more information upon which to consult. And then after 2 or 3 minutes of clarifying questions, we will move into a consultation round. And the way that will work is that our client will mute themselves and turn off their webcam, but importantly listen, while the rest of us in the group have a discussion about the client's case. And that's where we'll generate our consultation and advice. And after about, I believe, 7, 8, 15 minutes, something like that, the client will come back and share their takeaway from having heard this consultation, and basically let us know what information was particularly relevant for them and might be more useful, or just, or whatever. We'll find out. So does anybody have questions about the procedure for Wise Crowds and how that'll work in terms of nuts and bolts? All right, seems like we're clear enough. And you can find that an explanation of that on the website for Liberating Structures at liberatingstructures.com/wise crowds, I believe. All of the tools are available there. Well, which brings us to our next question: Who has a design brief for us to work on today? So a design brief can be really anything. I mean, it can be a meeting or a workshop or a training. It can be some interaction that we're looking to design in a highly pro-social way. But, we've also taken all sorts. They can also be bigger, larger projects. How might I go around getting shit done?
Yes, I have one, if I may.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm taking a group of about 15 people to Costa Rica for a wellness week. And it's a really beautiful place, and I'm thinking of it as being very unstructured. These are mostly, but not all, people working in healthcare. And it came from just doing webinars all over the country during the pandemic and recognizing that people were really needing a reset of some kind. So what I was thinking about doing, it's a house that has a chef, so nobody has to really do anything. And it's near these beautiful deserted beaches. And there's, horseback riding and hiking and bike riding and all these things that people can do on their own. And I was thinking I wanted to have people gather sort of after breakfast for, maybe 90 minutes and do some kind of exercise on well-being. Like something around doing something like this, having people name the thing that's interfering with their well-being. Maybe doing the bravery exercise, a time I was brave, because it often takes bravery to pursue your own well-being when it's not modeled or rewarded in the workplace. So I wanted people to leave with a sense of commitment to themselves in a new way, and their community, so that it's more caring and more humane. And so I'm looking for ideas of exercises to do, with that 90 minutes. So it's like 6 or 7 days. And that's what I'd like to do. And the other little problem with this that I'm struggling with is that there are 2 people coming that don't like to do group activities. And we're pretty far along in this, and I don't know if I should have erected a boundary around that I'm not a cruise director, vacation planner, that I want to go deep on well-being. And this is a program that I don't want people to opt out of. Because I originally thought that people could just come and go as they want. And I had an experience bringing a group last May, and it was there weren't enough boundaries set up. People were on their phone, they were texting. It was really it really rattled me. So I want to have a little more guardrails up around this, because people are coming and saying they're desperate to get away and kind of reset their lives. So that's sort of I'd love to just get some ideas about how to spend that 90 minutes, and also how to set it up. Like, what kind of guardrails from the very beginning should I have?
Okay, let me see if I get you. So our sort of place or context is a bit of a retreat space for this wellness group, and that the purpose for that is to sort of lean into this idea of well-being, and to sort of escape and give folks an opportunity to recharge. The participants are coming from, it sounds like, from different contexts together. So do they have any type of shared context? Do they know each other?
No, some do, some don't. Some are married. There's only one males. It's mostly women. There are some, I think, members. I think there's 2 sets of mothers and daughters coming. So it's all different.
Okay.
Adult daughters.
And let's see. And
find the how do
sorry, Carlos, I'm sorry. Can you speak up? Sorry. I mean, Juan. Juan, can you speak up?
how do people find that your program or this retreat? Like,
yeah, thank you.
Are in your
I have a blog called The Wellness Pearl that I send out less than once a month, and it's very original and edgy. And I have about 5,000 subscribers, that so they all know me some way, and they trust me.
okay.
And do they have all experiences in healthcare?
Not everybody. I'm not sure about some of them. So that was the other thing about doing more of an intake. I don't really know. I've just asked a couple of questions about what they hope to get out of it, what they hope to leave with. So I don't really know some of the people's backgrounds.
And if I understood correctly, what you say, the problem is they come to this and just act as if it's like a vacations.
There was 2 people at my last one, and they they were constantly going off, hiring drivers to take them into town, and they just weren't participating. And then during meals, like, one of them was taking phone calls, and I only had 2 rules, which was, one is to spend some time in solitude, and to try hard not to miss the sunsets. And I think I need more structure, actually, than that.
Yeah. Okay.
And you said that this is a week-long.
A week. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are there any other clarifying questions?
Yes, maybe. Go ahead, Sherry.
What constitutes participation?
Looks like Sherry's got a question.
Yeah, well, I think it's that's a really good question. It's just that these kind of wellness sessions, I don't know what to call them. And if you don't want to participate, I'm not sure if you should participate in anything else. Like, when we go horseback riding, or we go on the sunset sail, or any of the things that we sort of do as a group. It doesn't feel comfortable to me now to come on this trip and not participate in the well-being context, because that's what I don't want to become, like a cruise director. Like, I can take people on a really fun vacation, but that's not my purpose.
And when you were saying, I want that people go deep?
Yes.
How do you define that? Going deep where?
Well, into themselves about what's not working, what are they tolerating, what do they need to say no to? It's often courage, in the workplace, because these health systems that people are working in, for example, are just so broken and toxic. And so it's really, how are you going to be either in this place or out of it and not get sick as a result and host a chronic illness because of the way you're living?
Is there a selection process to
No,
so
my HR
or they
friend
just
told me,
sign
yeah,
in?
my HR friend told me I wasn't really allowed to do that.
Why not?
I don't know. I just, it was whoever kind of put the deposit down and showed interest. So I haven't screened any of these people, which is scary and frightening. I don't know how to do that. And I don't know what's legal and what's not.
Okay. Well, could you have like a call with them before they sign up? So you explain that it's maybe it's not
This
a
is,
this is work.
and we're kind of on the edge right now, so it sounds like we're already moving into consultation.
Oh,
That's some advice. So Eileen, what I'll invite you to do is go ahead and mute yourself and turn off your webcam, and importantly, listen while we chop it up about your request. So, Juan, you were making a suggestion around some form of like intake or selection screening. What do you? Can
yeah.
you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, either just have a call with them to make it clear that they're aligned with this thing and they understand that it's not a cruise or vacations. It's some actually you're going there to work. Even if yes, you do horseback riding and whatever, but you're there to work on yourself, right? And maybe not like a selection that you are approved or not, but just that you are clear on why you're coming.
For sure, some form of checksum just to give folks maybe some more surface area about what Eileen is expecting, which also seems like a crucial piece of information. Like, to what extent is that expectation sort of well articulated? Like, hey, my name's Eileen, and you're coming to this thing, and this is what I expect from you. It's there's always some form of expectation that we have of one another. So is there an opportunity to communicate about that gives folks the opportunity to go, oh, well, I may be down for to pay a deposit and to but part of those things I want to say yes to, part of those things I want to say no to, and to be able to make a decision on the basis of that. One thing that jumps out like quite quickly for me in terms of like different patterns and structures that could use to create this container and generate this clarity is a pattern called purpose to practice. Purpose to practice is a larger macro structure. It includes a conversation about 5 different topics: purpose and why, what is it we're doing here together, principles, what are the sort of the directions, and the ideas, what are the sort of rulish type things, what are the principles we need to follow in order to accomplish that purpose. Who are the participants? Are there any roles in participation? Who are the people? How do we define ourselves as a group? Structures. Are there any type of structures that we need to organize, again, to help us stick to these principles and land on our purpose? And the last one is practices. So practices you can think of around like rituals or cadences or different things that we do on a recurring basis that again are going to help us live into those principles and stick the landing on our practice, on our purpose. And so that purpose to practice might be a really good exercise. I know she said that she'd like to do so much more of a self-organizing, do your own thing. But especially if you're going to be together for a week, like you're going to there's the opportunity to create a pretty strong group dynamic. And that group dynamic can be super pro-social, and it can be as free as you want it to be, but it just creates some form of opportunity to bring people together and have an exchange about, more or less, like she said, what do they want to get out of this week? What do they want it to be like for them? And you can, within each one of those individual macro structures of these 5 different topics, you can also think about using particular liberating structures in order to facilitate that conversation. For example, the question around purpose, 9 whys is an extremely good structure to use there. Also, drawing together, inviting people to use these 5 visual symbols for wholeness, support, goal, relationships, and change to represent their individual purpose around why they're there for the week, and to interpret one another's drawings. I actually just did a week-long unconference back here in September, or August, one of these months of the year, where we created a shared canvas. We used paint to actually draw an artifact of what we wanted the week to be like together. So those are 2 good structures for purpose. Around principles, appreciative interviews is the one I tend to default into. Invite people into pairs and to tell a story about a time that went like they want this time to go. And then to use the overlap of those 2 different stories from each person to identify those principles, those sort of guidelines that maybe these are the good things that we should lean into. And for participants, I don't know to what extent this is required, but an activity similar to, for example, what I need from you could be very helpful if you want to sort of have different roles, or just something as simple as one. And it could be really helpful to think about, hey, what are the types of roles that we want to play for each other in this game? And then around structures, that could be just being clear about this thing where every day we want a 90-minute conversation. That could be a good way to discuss what the expectation is for both that structure and as well as those practices. Are there any particular rituals that you'd like to create together that enable you and the group to reinforce those principles? And again, like I said, stick the landing on your purpose. And one of those, a particular structure that might be helpful in crowdsourcing that information is 25-10 crowdsourcing. And the way that runs is you would basically hand everybody an index card, tell them to write down an idea they have for a ritual that we could use, that we might be able to use to have a super awesome good time together. And then you would invite everybody to basically trade index cards 5 times and score the index cards on a scale of 1 to 5. And that would help automatically organize the ideas that the group thinks, hey, these are probably the most interesting rituals. And if you wanted to, you could grab the top 3 or just the top 1 and say, hey, let's try it. Let's run an experiment. Let's try and do this. We think it's a good idea. And away we go. And that also helps anonymize the ideas because they don't need much explanation because they're just on the cards. So that's what jumps out to me initially to help sort of set that container. Anybody else? What are we thinking in terms of how perhaps this aspect around this reflective work, what might be helpful there?
So I would say that there is a reflective work about boundaries, putting boundaries in hospital when you are a healthcare, when you have a healthcare job. So it's very precise, and that means that it's for for participants who are working in healthcare. So it enter in conflict with these people who want to come for vacation. So I was wondering maybe either to say, okay, it's for people who has healthcare job, or to put to say, okay, we open to everyone, but we can say we can put some options like today we have 1 hour for healthcare people to talk about what are our feelings when we are working with patients, when we are working in team, when we are working in this institution that are not very well today. So that's come to my mind. And yes, also when one was saying maybe explain very clearly with telephone by calling people, but to me the best thing would be to write a very precise communication on this week. What is it? And people, they will decide if it's for them or not. You don't have to decide that for them. And so just write very precisely what is it, and then people will join or not if they think it's for them, I think. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, like be very clear about what is it not. It is not a vacation. Huh? And Sherry wrote the question here also. I'm gonna read it. It says, it sounds like things have been fine until people who don't want to participate show up to the meeting. So what are the struggles and fears around that?
So one way to have a continuous conversation about this might be to think along the lines of some form of force field analysis. So a force field analysis just looks at, you know, what are the driving forces, what are the forces that are sort of at work, at play at the group that are working well for us and to sort of enable us to participate in ways that, again, line up with our principles and help us get closer to our purpose. And what are the restraining forces? What is the observable reality that is occurring in the group that is restraining our participation and might be getting in the way? And so one way to have that conversation, especially about the restraining forces, because those tend to be the most interesting. It never makes any sense to spend much time building up your driving forces. It always makes more sense reducing your restraining forces. It's like if you were driving a car, you know, would you put a bigger motor in, or push the gas pedal down, or would you take off the emergency brake? Take off the emergency brake first, and then you can go forward, so to speak. And so thinking about this observational data under the structure of what, so what, now what? What did we see? What is the factual observation? What do we see, hear, and notice? And what is the inference? Why does that observation matter? What's the impact of it? What is the meaning that we make out of it? And then to invite the group again to think about now what. Now what might we do around this information for these driving forces, whether that be our participation here or outside of the context. Could be a powerful way to help sort of organize thinking and do some of this reflective work that Eileen was sort of referring to. It seems like it lines up with that question around what interferes with well-being. So I think that seems like an amount of information. Eileen, why don't you come back and tell us what seems useful from our consultation?
Well, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. Just mountains. I mean, just about everything that was said. And I thought one of the things that jumped out at me was just how interesting it is. I think Pauline, about how I'm kind of modeling almost boundary setting by being really specific that they then take back to their workplace. These are the boundaries that I need to pursue my own well-being, and actually having that in place there. I don't know if that's what you meant. That's what I heard. It was so interesting. Yeah, and I think that I'm probably thinking I have to do too much work here, that you're just asking the group the question, what Jeremy was just saying about what's not working. And I really wish I had done that in my very first one that I did. I did it as an experiment to learn, and I learned a lot. And it was just this one person was really annoying everybody. And I was the person that was really empowered to interrupt it. And I didn't, and so the idea of having the group really look at the group is just beautiful. So I loved all the exercise about from principles to practice, and starting out that way about I guess I'm thinking it's we co-create principles. I have some ideas, but maybe that's not what I create. I don't know if that's my work or the group's. So anyway, just everything I heard, everything is interactive and powerful, and really around this group cohesion that I hadn't really, that wasn't the lens I was thinking about this. It was much more individualistic. And what happened in my very first one is that the group did have this powerful caring web, that Pauline uses that term, this web of care. It ended up by chance being created on its own, but I like the idea of being very forthright about that. So just everything that was said, I've got to dissect all of this and do some work here. Thank you.
And Sherry also, it looks like in the chat, had some additional points. She suggested TRIZ as a good exercise that could help. That could actually add a lot of levity to this type of topic. So TRIZ again invites us to actively brainstorm what we could do to create the worst possible outcome. So instead of brainstorming all of the things that we could do to be great, like how would we make an absolute shit show out of that week and end up all hating each other and make it super toxic? And then using that list of things that we recognize would lead to bad outcomes, we can use that to either think about, all right, that's our no list, our do not do list is this stuff. And it can also act as a powerful reflective tool of, hey, are we actually doing anything that looks like that, even in small ways?
So good. That's so good.
For sure. Well, so that's the pattern that is wise crowds. I notice in this particular moment, I want to take an opportunity to to debrief the structure that is wise crowds itself. So for debriefing a structure, a pattern, or an interaction game, there's 3 questions that I find particularly helpful. And the first question is, what did this game that we just played of wise crowds, what did it enable? What did it help us do?
A question for me or all of us?
Not just all of us as a group. Like, what does it help us do?
Well, for me, I guess it helps us realize the power of the group, and it's liberating, right? It's the whole point is liberate people to tap into more power, and move away from this individualistic approach that I tend to, my default.
Thank you. Anybody else? So I'm thinking, I'm asking the question much more about the game itself, the pattern of the game, this way in which we share a help request, we clarify the help request, we give advice, absence of the person helping the help request, and then we get some reflection back at the end about what was salient and impactful. What does that stuff help make possible?
I would say by listening and giving attention to somebody else's problematic or challenge, you are not criticizing yourself when it's your own problem. So potentially you can be more objective in what you observe, or I don't know, your approach.
And when we ask question for explanation, I feel like taking the path of the curiosity is super important. It's like we are looking for fluffy things, and you know, that's not the word.
Continue.
And when you hear something that you, oh, here there is something that I don't understand very well, so I need you to explain me better, and that way the person is finding his own solution. Yeah, I feel that.
Often there are many things that we sort of implicitly think the others understand, until someone is like, no, wait, I don't understand this, like, explain me again.
Yeah, and Sherry also offers in the chat, gives clarity for better problem solving. Indeed. And so like this thread, especially around just paying attention to each other, right? Like no matter what, the advice tends to be good. It just does. But even when the advice isn't particularly good or particularly relevant, it just has a sort of therapeutic effect to hear people take seriously what you're wrestling with, right? Coming back to this idea, Pauline, of this web of care, like, yeah, we've paid it, no matter what, whether my ideas aren't really relevant for you, at least I'm paying attention, at least I care about what you're going through. Now, the additional question for debrief is a little bit trickier, but it is a powerful one. And when you think about this pattern of asking for help and giving advice, what are the anti-patterns that this particular game of wise crowds helped to interrupt or prevent? Like,
you mean anti-patterns for advice?
Yeah, so when it comes to giving and getting help or advice, what type of anti-patterns did we not see present because of this structure?
Answers from the person. The person is listening, so it's not the person is not on the defensive behavior, just listening and open to what people say, even if they are not agree, I think.
Yeah, the fact that they cannot respond immediately forces them to pay more attention to the way we understood what they explained, instead of trying to be like, oh no, but you didn't understand, and it is like this, and yeah, I think that's very good.
Yeah, and I guess it's just interrupting the pattern of like having to control people. It's and operate in silos. It interrupts the silo thinking and control. Because I kept thinking I need more rules, I need more control. That's not it, actually. I need to liberate more. So that was kind of an interesting anti-pattern that was interrupted.
Yeah, and one of these things, I think it's definitely in the through line of what was already discussed of interrupting removing the person asking advice. I noticed that when I ask for advice, I very much want to explain as well why the advice I'm given won't work, right? So, like just to sit with that and consider for sure, it tends to be helpful. And then the last question for debrief is where might you be able to make use of this pattern of this particular game that is Wise Crowds? Is there a context, an environment, a specific space, or a place and time that might be appropriate to make use of this game?
Well, we have another project which is about writing in a collaborative way, or creating narratives in a collaborative way, you know, like movies or stories in general, like series, etc. And I think this could be useful for people that are looking for feedback on their works in progress.
Cool, thank you.
And for my work, you know, certainly with going into, you know, organizations and there's some kind of problem, and, you know, using this on any problem I can think of, nurse retention, you know, a toxic person on a team. There's so many things that this could be used in healthcare.
Well, looks like we got some ideas there. Well, that is the pattern. That is Wise Crowds. Did we have another design brief or any point that anybody else would like consultation on?
We don't know if there is enough time to do once again.
Yeah, as long as we stick to the time boundaries. I have a tendency of being a little lazy and not using them. But if we stick to the time boundaries, we should be 15 minutes.
Okay. So within the context of this thing, the conversations we want to record, we want to do to start doing an experiment within a sort of smaller community of people we already know, which is Kernel, and we want to propose people that to come every week for 1 hour, and in which you will get matched with 3 different people to have 3 20-minute conversations, which will be recorded and shared with the rest of the participants. The outcome of this is that we want to test if our hypothesis is actually, if it really works, and this creates over, I don't know, a few months web of care where people feel like they know each other a lot better and that they create relationships. What else? What else? So who will need to be involved? I think we would need at least like maybe 6 start people coming on each session for it to actually work. If it's like just for people every week, it won't scale in that way. And what else? The constraints, 20 minutes every week. It's all online. And we want to figure out how to use like some structures like what you're proposing to help people get into the authentic part of conversation faster, you know, because we often tend to like do small talk and you only really get to the important things after a longer time of talking about things that are not important. So we are looking for strategies to help the emergence of more authentic conversations. What else?
There is a thing with authentic conversation. We don't want to take the path of therapy. It's very important for us that it's not a place for, like, for example, for lonely people who are depressed and don't have friends and just want to have conversation. The idea is more like a place where you come to because you want to be a citizen and contribute to this society who is interdependent, and you want to reinforce these bonds and make it with a better quality, because this interdependency exists, and you want to help by not being individualists, but being a community, reinforce these bonds in the community. Yeah, and this structure that we want to find is really to go towards this social cohesion. Yeah.
It seems like a lot of the social media we have now are geared towards fueling individualism and like attention-seeking behavior, you know, and we don't want people to come here precisely seeking for attention because they're lonely, or yeah, as a form of therapy, but more as to come here because they're curious about other people, more as a sense of duty, you know, in a way, like a civic duty, actually, to be curious about your neighbor or your internet neighbor, you know.
Okay, clarifying questions. One that comes up for me is, I'm familiar with the context that you're describing, but can you give some brief description about the context that is kernel?
Okay. Yeah, so kernel is a learning community of people in Web3, which is blockchain related, but kernel is actually more about the philosophy of why people are building these systems in the social sense more than the technological sense. And so it's a group of I forgot the word, like batches, cohorts, and it's like 300 people every 3 months, and it's very interesting because it's people that are often that share similar values of creating a more pro-social world, I would say, and how to use technology towards these goals. Would you say that it's a good description, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's it. So it's a group of people who know each other, that are broadly value aligned, or don't know each other, actually. A group of people that don't really know each other, but are share a context of a learning journey. So are there any additional clarifying questions?
Yeah, I mean, how you define helping or caring and when is caring not helpful? You can slip into martyrdom or codependence or
Hmm. Um, yeah, it has to be both ways, you know.
Mm.
It's not that actually related to what we were saying. We don't want it to be like you come here for therapy, you come here to consume service, but you come here to give also. In that sense, it's not about I will go there so people will care about me. I will go there so I care also about for other people, you know.
Mm. It's a place where there is no more role about who is the savior, who is the person who has knowledge, who is the person who who is the victim. It's you come as human, and it's horizontal conversation where you help each other. So there is never this moment where you are the one who caring and the other one who is cared. It's every time in both ways. It's an exchange. Yeah.
Any final clarifying question?
I guess just, I mean, how do you make sure that's true? Just working with humanity, that's not often always how people show up. So if somebody is wholly unwell, for example, and you talked about the distinction between therapy and
This question is already on the boundary between consultation
Sorry.
and coaching. So we'll
clarifying. Okay. Okay.
Shira, do you have any question, or should we let her rip? What might be your goal for the cohesion? Is there one?
Yeah, well, the great goal is to go from competition to collaboration, to stop thinking that in order for you as an individual to have a better life, you need to compete with other people, and to realize that actually in nature, collaboration is a far better strategy because we are all interdependent.
All right. Well, Pauline, Juan, I'll invite you to turn off your webcam and mute yourself, and importantly, listen while we do our thing. So, Eileen, you had some recognition of the challenge that is, sticking to this sweet spot given, people and the world. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, just, there's needy people show up with an inappropriate issue. Like, I don't know if they have to define like how personal it is. When does it become therapy? What happens if somebody is disruptive and sort of just like a taker, or somebody that just only gives and doesn't take, the whole reciprocity thing they were talking about. I'm not sure, but I would imagine that would become problematic unless everybody's so aligned.
Yeah, so there's a couple different, it's for sure tricky. So I think there's a whole basket of authentic relating games that the best book I found that articulates a whole bunch of them is From Conflict to it is Conflict Equals Something. I forget what the title of the book is. Conflict Equals Energy, something along those lines. But the authentic relating games is a pretty large category, like circling is probably the most well-known version of these authentic relating games. You could try with playing those explicitly. Also, a version of this pattern that we're using right now, the Wise Crowds. The shrunk down version is Troika Consulting, and that you would do in a circle of 3 people, and you would go around the circle where everyone gets the opportunity to ask for help, and everyone also gets the opportunity to give help twice. So that might anchor that reciprocity and go directly for care. There's also a line of inquiry that comes up for me around the rigor for this. They said they wanted to test this hypothesis. So it came up a couple times of like, how do you know that you're creating this web of care? Like, what might you see, hear, and notice? So it sounds like they have a clean hypothesis, is that we believe that people interacting on a regular basis and exposing those interactions to a larger group might create a web of care. It's a perfectly testable and valid hypothesis. And so what they're going to do seems relatively clear, offering these calls. But what's less clear is what they're going to measure in order to evaluate whether or not their hypothesis is true. And I would very much encourage them, it's come up as well, the null hypothesis. Like, if it turns out they're wrong, what would be the things that they would notice? For sure, seeing people sort of enter into the drama triangle would be part of it, right? This idea of victimhood and saviors and persecutors. But what might be the telltale evidence that lets them know, oh, this thing is sort of moving in the wrong direction? And what might their sort of intervention space be to dampen those dynamics again, should they arise? Around this idea of the drama triangle, there is an opposing pattern that is also good to probably good to keep in mind. I don't know if it's the type of thing you want to tell people, but it's definitely good from a design perspective, and that is the empowerment dynamic. So the empowerment dynamic leans into desire, and so what that does is it transforms the role of victim into the role of creator. It's very, very simple from the intervention is literally, what do you want, right? So what does the victim want to have happen? Instantly change that sense of victimhood, poor me, into creativity. Or what I want to have happen is, you're already moving towards desire. The role of the persecutor evolves into the role of the challenger, because putting someone to the challenge and creating a clear boundary might be very challenging for people, and that is an appropriate role. And versus the role of the savior of come in and make it all better, there is the role of the coach, which doesn't suppose to have all of the answers, but does offer help in the form of inquiry. And that might be one really powerful overall way to think about it, is rather than, if you wanted to try and sort of offer care and avoid advice, that focusing on questions is a really good way to do that, right? To only be able, I used to know someone with Miriam Hadness, who runs the Never Done Before podcast, or the Workshops Work podcast, and runs the Never Done Before community. It's a community of facilitators. She had a method for a mastermind, and the first step of that mastermind, after sharing the help request, was a brainstorm on questions, where the consultants could only ask questions. And actually, the client it wasn't even required the client answered the questions. It was just to receive all of these questions, opened up all of these additional threads of thinking that was pretty helpful. Anybody else I yammered a lot in that one.
Well, I would just to say that I would think that that trust is earned, and and I don't know how much this community knows each other, but how you just jump in and have this authentic trust. And I was thinking about Brene Brown's Braving acronym, where there's boundaries, reliability, accountability, all the things that, you know, whatever they are principles that they create or using hers, so that you're building trust faster to get there faster. Because it's hard to just jump on a call and be authentic in 20 minutes, I think.
Let's see, what else we got? Sherry, did you have anything for these guys? It's possible to be authentic in a short. Sarah says, I think it is possible to be authentic in a short amount of time. So challenging that assumption that it's not. Oh. So for sure. Now that could be an interesting draw. How to deal with people who are not self-aware. Yeah. Are you sure of themselves? No doubt. One of the things that I noticed is probably the most important dynamic of what I think they're going to create is invitation. They might sign up and find out last minute that they don't fit one in Pauline's criteria. Yeah, for sure. I think that might they're sort of fishing from a pretty positive pool of pro-social people. So that seems relatively like a good place to start. But for sure, offering some form of propositional container. So what I do for the Think Slow Dojo, for example, is I offer this manifesto for slow thinking, and by presenting that, it gives people a set of ideas, and they go, oh, you know, I agree, and sign up for an exploration around those ideas, and that helps sort of motivate the quote unquote the right people to get in the room. But around the actual conversations themselves, the specific question that you ask that prompts, you know, so let's just say they run with these one-on-one interactions of 20 minutes. The particular question that you offer is actually the hardest part, and probably going to be the thing that's the most impactful for how the dialogue goes. Like if I ask a question with a bad question, not particularly bad, but bad, how was your day? Right? It doesn't have a lot of surface area. Whereas a good question or a good invitation that sparks off an interaction is going to do a laundry list of pro-social things. First and foremost, you'll notice that a good question doesn't tend to judge or frame, right? A good question is going to, you know, be pretty values neutral. It's also going to open up avenues for thinking instead of closing them down. So instead of, you know, how was your day? You know, offering 3 different avenues for thinking about your day, like, you know, what was just a very simple example. What was the good, the bad, and the ugly part of your day already opens up some particular avenues for thinking about that topic. Also, good invitations or good questions tend to be specific about the problem space, but ambiguous about the perspective that people should take about the problem space or the subject matter. And that really opens up a lot of the surface for divergent thinking. If you tell people, hey, look at this thing, but you don't tell them whether they should look at it from the top, the bottom, the side, the left, the right, or from the inside, even, you'll find that people just look at it from ways that are vastly different, and that adds a lot of diversity to it. And one way that you can help that as well is that a good invitation will be slightly abstract. So you may get people that go, hey, hold on, wait a minute. I'm not sure exactly what or how to think about that thing because this question you asked is slightly abstract. Let me see if I can grab an example of an invitation that I used here recently. I don't have an example of an invitation. I have lots of invitations, but I guess I'm probably just looking too specifically or narrowly about a particular type of one. So let me just see if I can find any old design storyboard. Yeah, so here's an invitation that I offered. Imagine that you had unlimited resources. What needs care, attention, and regeneration in the space that you inhabit? So specific about a problem space, what needs care, attention, and regeneration. I open up different avenues of thinking about care, regeneration, and attention. And it's pretty values neutral. It doesn't tell you what to think about anything in particular. I've got a YouTube video where I talk about invitations. If you want to go to the gospel, Jeremy and the Gospel Change on the YouTube thing, it's in the link tree that's floating around on Twitter. But we're coming close to time, so I would ask Pauline and Juan to come back and tell us what they thought of the consultation and where they want to take it from there.
Hello. Wait, so there was a question from Sri. And what if you have people who hate open-ended questions and don't want to think in abstract? Okay.
But now it's takeaways.
Yes. What are your takeaways?
There was a lot of scarcity in my structure strategy since few days. Like I was thinking what kind of structure we can use because we don't want to go there, and it was like I don't have ideas, and now like there are like a lot of examples and new way of thinkings, and now it feels like I'm nourished about all these possibilities that we can take, and it reminds me that solutions exist and we will find it.
Yeah, I think we can run many experiments with all the things you just mentioned and see if they work. And it's interesting that at first it appeared to be that you understood this as something people would come because they have a problem and like looking for a solution, and it's not necessarily that our objective, more that like if you would go to hang out with friends, you know? And sometimes when you hang out with friends you talk about your problems, but not all the times, you know? Sometimes like for example what you said, Jeremy, about imagine you have unlimited resources, what needs care, etc. That's something that applies to everyone now, right, in our life. And you could be like, yeah, this could change in the world, and it's not necessarily something that is like a pressing problem for you as an individual, but that thinking about these things allows us to know more about who you are, you know.
And who are we as a community? And
Yeah.
we, yeah.
What else?
Oh, good stuff.
Mm, and yeah, what you said about the invitation,
It appears that we're
important also. Like how do we frame this the participation, like why would you come to this, needs to be very clear, I think, so that people are already primed in a way to be open, to be authentic, if you decide to sign up and come at this hour, at this time, etc., because you already agree with what we are proposing.
there you go. There you have it. One particular works out to me thinking about this. If you were to share the question that you're going to have people discuss, or that could be people already automatically opting into the space and warming up for. So I would like to say thank you to everybody for offering your time, attention, and energy. And as well, I would like to give you the opportunity to download a POAP for participating in this space. And so I'm going to try and do that in a way that's not too much work for anybody. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But if it does, it might be miraculous. Content. So if you use a phone or a device to follow can you guys see my screen?
No.
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 So if you use a QR code scan, no? Not working?
No.
You are a bit freezing.
Mm.
We lost him.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to sign off. It was really nice to meet you, Pauline and Juan. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for your help.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your questions and advice.